Matthew 2, verses 1 to 12. After the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem during the time of King Herod, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him." When Herod heard this, he was disturbed, as was all Jerusalem. So he called together all the chief priests and teachers of the law and asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, Judea," they replied, and they repeated what the prophet had written. "But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Herod called the wise men secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared, then sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, let me know so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw this, they were overjoyed. And when they went in and saw the child with his mother Mary, they bowed down and worshipped him. They then presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, the wise men returned to their own country by another route.
Well, it's lovely to be with you again on December the 22nd. I can hardly believe that we're nearly Christmas Day. Today's story from a lovely book, Tracing Glory, is entitled Guiding Star. Now, I've sat here in my dining room because there's lots of stars here. There's a lovely light star. There's a star to hold these nice serviettes with a star on the Christmas tree. There's this star on top of this Christmas tree here, and there is this star, which we've had a lovely Christmas card today from our friends in Glodith in Llandudno. And here we see some of the people who were looking for that star. Now, today's story is about really this star that men saw coming from. They come from the east. And they saw this star, and it was very strange, really, because they hadn't seen it before. But they were very, very clever men. They knew all about the prophecies in the Old Testament, so they read up on these scriptures, and they realised that there was something very special about this star. And as I'm looking now, my friend Ruth Jones painted this, and I love this picture. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Bethlehem, even though it's her interpretation of Tenby. It's a bit like Bethlehem, isn't it? All these little houses together, people all clustered together, going there for the census. And there are tiny little stars. Well, actually, there's two I can see. You can't see them from here, though. But anyway, so Christmas is often, we see lots of stars around Christmas, twinkly lights and things. But this star wasn't just like a little white dot we often see in the sky. It was such a bright light that lots of people saw it, and not just religious people, but people who studied the sky. Now, I know that my sister-in-law's dad, he is very, very good at that, Graham Appleby. And that's the kind of thing that he does, although I don't really know what he does, but I'm sure he knows a great deal more than I do about stars and about astrology and how things change in the sky. I just look up at the sky and think, wow, that is beautiful, it's amazing, it's incredible, especially on a clear night, which it isn't at the moment. It's wonderful to see those stars in the sky, and sometimes we're told about a shooting star, and we see a shooting star or a specific thing, and everybody's waiting for this star. And it was a bit like what happened in our story today, that my dad kindly read for us, and I don't know if you noticed, but there was lovely music playing in the background, Silent Night, and that was lovely. So thanks, Dad, for reading that. And he read Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, and verses 1 to 12. So here's our story for today. Just as God announced the arrival of Jesus to the shepherds in an amazing way, he announced Jesus' arrival to another group of people in an equally amazing way. God used a bright star to tell a group of men called Magi about the birth of the long-awaited Saviour and King. The Magi lived in East Asia, far from Bethlehem. The Magi were known as wise men. They were experts in mysteries like magic and dream telling, and they studied space and the stars. When Jesus was born, God made a new star appear in the sky. The Magi saw this star, and they knew that a great king had come into the world. The Magi made a long trip to the city of Jerusalem. They asked people where they could find this new king because they wanted to come and worship him and give him glory. Now, at that time, a man called Herod was ruling as king over God's people. Herod was not from Abraham and David's big family. He didn't know the one true God. When Herod heard that the Magi were looking for a new king, he became very jealous and afraid. I bet he did. Herod did not want this new king to take his throne. So he told the Magi to find the baby and come back to tell him where he was. Herod pretended he wanted to worship the baby king too, but really he wanted to kill him. God made the new star move in the sky. You don't see that very often, do you? Usually stars are there and they don't move. So that must have been a very unusual sight. The hearts of the Magi were filled with happiness as the star guided them to the house where Mary, Joseph, and Jesus were staying. When the Magi entered the house and saw Jesus, they bowed down low to worship him. They gave him presents fit for a king: gold, frankincense, and, you know the last one, myrrh. God warned the Magi in a dream not to tell wicked Herod that they'd found Jesus, so they went home a different way. How unexpected and amazing that God led these Magi so far away, all the way to Bethlehem, to bow down before the one true God and King. The promises God had made to Abraham were already starting to come true. God was beginning to show people from other nations the good news about King Jesus, so he could bless them by forgiving their sins and bringing them into his big family. Now the Magi, and it's spelt M-A-G-I, and that's where we get our word magic from. So the Magi were very wise and powerful and rich men. They were they lived far away from in the east. And they, if you remember, they saw the star because that was their job. That was what they did. They looked to the skies and saw. They made an account of different things that happened. Now this was an extra special thing. They didn't know what this star was, but when they looked at the scriptures, they realized that a king was being born. All that the prophets had been spoken of this Messiah, the king that was coming, they put two and two together and realized that God was doing something special and incredible and something that he'd never done before. And so they wanted to come and worship him as the one true God and King. Now the good news of Jesus is not just for Israel. I said this yesterday, didn't I? But from people from every tribe, every colour, every look, every language, every place on earth, even those who are far away like us. So some questions I wonder if you want to think about. who were the Magi and where were they from? That's an easy one. And I wonder if you could explain how this story shows that God was keeping his promises that he'd made to Abraham many years before. And a really important question. No one is too far away from Jesus to be rescued. No one. Perhaps you could think of someone who seems far away from God. Maybe they don't like God, maybe they hate him, maybe they don't want anything to do with God. Perhaps you could ask God to help you to speak to them, or you could ask God to ask him to rescue that person through Jesus, because no one is outside of Jesus. Everyone, as we've read, everyone will hear this good news and everyone can respond to it. And so it's a wonderful story, isn't it? And it's something that I think lots of people forget, or maybe they don't know. But like this picture here, you can see the wise men, because they're on camels, and you can see their sort of hats. And there's another one. But in the Bible, it tells us that these wise men didn't come on that same night that Jesus was born. They came about 2 years later. And we know that because, perhaps I'm giving the game away here. Let me just check the next page, make sure I'm not saying anything. 2 years after Jesus was born, Herod sent a message to all the people in Bethlehem, and he had every baby boy killed who were 2 years old and under. And so we know that the wise men, and they weren't necessarily three, that's another thing that we've thought of in our heads, because there were three gifts. But we do know that they came about 2 years later. So often when you see a nativity scene, I try and put the wise men a bit further away, because they are part of that story, because this star is very important. But lots of people don't realise that it was 2 years later. And so when you read the story, it'll make more sense to you again. And so I hope that we've tried to explain things simply to you. Maybe you know these things already. Maybe you've never heard them before. But it's a wonderful story, and we've covered all of this book so far. And look how much we've got left. There's hardly anything left. And I'm looking forward to completing the next 3 days. There's only 3 days left, so 23rd, 24th and then 25th. So I hope that you'll be able to join me for the end of the story. And if you don't manage to listen to it on the same day, it'll be on YouTube, so you can check it out anyway. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope that you can join us tomorrow, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.